Welcome to the Tough Decisions Daily Show with your hosts, Dan and Dennae Hanford. As entrepreneurs and real estate investors, we are faced with tough decisions on a daily basis. These tough decisions can either make us or break us. On this show, you will hear from highly successful people sharing their stories behind tough decisions that they have had to make along their journey of success. In every episode, you will be able to learn from the thought processes behind the tough decisions that were made. Some of these decisions will have amazing outcomes, and some not so much. So without further ado, your hosts, Dan and Dennae.
We have with us today Kathy Fettke. She is the co-CEO of Real Wealth Network and the best-selling author of Retire Rich with Rentals. She's an active real estate investor, licensed real estate agent, and former mortgage broker. And she has a passion for researching real estate market cycles. She's the frequent guest on several news outlets and as well as with the Wall Street Journal. She was also named among the top 100 most intriguing entrepreneurs. So, Kathy, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. And why don't you start by just telling us a little bit about how you got into real estate? And it says you're also a former mortgage banker or broker. So just talk to us a little bit about how you got into the field where you are today.
Well, I'd like to say that it was planned, but it was totally by accident. Yeah, I had a radio show in San Francisco, and it was mostly on personal success. But Rich and I ran into some financial issues when he had a melanoma, and he's fine today, but the medical bills had really increased, and the doctor actually told him he had 6 months to live, although the doctor was wrong, and Rich is healthy today. But at the time, we didn't know. So with all those medical bills and thought that maybe I'd be taking over the finances, I just changed my show to be all about wealth building and interviewed successful people. It turned out that most of them made their wealth through business or real estate, and often both.
Well, I talk to people all the time about, real estate, and, they say, I always tell them, most successful people that you see, they have, obviously some sort of business relationship, but they always are in real estate as well. So you've got to kind of be in both. Yeah.
Well, it's, if you're in real estate, that should be treated like a business. So at the end of the day, it's really all about running a good business.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it was really kind of by accident. I got a bunch of sponsors for the show, and one was a mortgage broker, because that was like mid 2000s. So mortgage brokers were just making money hand over fist. And he came in and sponsored the show. And I thought, boy, how am I going to make mortgages an interesting topic? My husband said, well, why don't you find out what people are doing with the money? And that became an extremely interesting topic, to interview these people that were getting mortgages and finding out how they were building wealth through leverage. So I ended up becoming a mortgage broker after I learned what was possible, and our financial problems were gone, because let me tell you, you could do really well back then.
Well, I want you to think about two different tough decisions that you've made along this journey that you have to get to where you are today. And first one I want to try to dive into and try to kind of see if you can share with us is a tough decision that you had along this journey that you had, obviously, spent some time, trying to make this decision, but maybe the outcome of that decision wasn't really what you expected or really what you wanted to happen. And so it wasn't one of those, really, really good decisions that you had made. And then we'll kind of go into the opposite on the other side. So can you share with us one of those tough decisions that you had made?
A tough decision that didn't work out so well?
Yes.
Oh boy, yeah, I've got plenty. So I'll start with, as I started talking real estate and wealth building and all these strategies, we built an audience very quickly, because I'm not the only one who wants to know how to create passive income. So suddenly my show went from, small to big. And then a lot of people preyed on that, because I had a following. And I had a following, but I wasn't experienced. And that's a dangerous combination. And that's actually something I'm seeing a lot today. A lot of these podcasters don't really have real estate experience, but they've got a following of people who think they do. And that was me. And so I was trying to learn as quickly as I could, but nothing beats experience and time, right? So one guy just kept calling me just over and over again. Hey, can I come speak to your group? By then I was hosting meetups and RIAs, and we had a big crowd that would come, and this guy would, always say, hey, I want to talk to you about private lending, and it's just one of the safest way to invest, and I want to talk to your group. And I just kept saying, no, 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 because it wasn't something I understood yet. And then I met him, a few years later, and he had just pestered me for so long. I finally met with him. And it kind of made sense. He was a hard money lender. So I let him come in and talk to the group about hard money lending, but I didn't understand it well enough to know how to teach properly and make sure people understood the ins and outs. And so I think it's very strange how people can go from good to bad, and you don't necessarily know why. Sometimes it's because someone in the family is sick and they need to pay for medical bills, and they start, skimming a little more than they should. In this case, I think he was going through a divorce and his wife was taking everything. Whatever the reason, he started to make poor decisions that I didn't know how to audit because I was new to private lending. And it just turns out he wasn't recording these notes. And so he would take the investor money, but sometimes he would take it outside of what was promised or more than, over the value of the property and again, just doing bad things. Now, we ended up finding out, but it was a little late, and investors lost money on, people who had come to that event and heard him speak and invested with him. Some of them lost money. And that was one of those times where it's like, oh, I knew there was a reason I was putting this guy off for so many years. Why didn't I trust myself on that? So yes, that was frustrating.
Well, and it's interesting that you say that because, every time that I've had a tough decision that I've had to make myself, and obviously, most of the decisions that I make, that are really tough, I'm always bringing Dennae into them as well. But almost every single one of those decisions, I don't say almost every, I would always say every one of those decisions that I've had to make where I've had that, either Dennae kind of having her intuition saying, I don't know if we really should do that, or maybe we shouldn't go that direction, or anytime I've had my own intuition not really being on board with something, every single time it's bit me in the rear end, and it hasn't gone the way I've really wanted it to go. And so I finally, at one point I had ended up, I actually spent $25,000 on a coaching mentor of mine. And we ended up for the first 2 weeks, didn't work out. He didn't like me. I didn't like him. It just, our personalities were just complete opposites. And they really just didn't, it was like oil and water. And he basically said, well, you told me you were going to pay me, so you have to pay me. And I never talked to him again after that first 2 weeks. But I fulfilled that agreement because that's what I told him that I was going to do. So I paid that $25,000 for 2 weeks of consulting that I didn't really want. And it was funny because before that, I really wasn't comfortable with it. And Dennae was kind of like on the edge about it. And so that was one of those bad mistakes. That's a very similar thing where you've brought on somebody where your gut and your intuition said, I don't know why, but this guy doesn't really fit me well. I don't really know if I should, but you do it anyway. And it just comes back to bite you.
Well, it's funny, Dan, because I was actually, while she was talking, I was thinking of the exact same scenario and the exact same kind of thing. And I think the frustrating thing about it is a lot of times you can't put your finger on exactly what it is. Like you don't have a concrete reason, but there's something about it. And sometimes we just have to be willing, to tell someone or a certain opportunity, I just can't do that. And I don't really know why, but it's just not right now. But we don't always like to do that because we like to have, be able to explain it with a definite reason. And sometimes we can't do that. So Kathy, what can you take us through as far as a decision that you have made that maybe did turn out the way you expected, or maybe even perhaps better than you expected? And talk us through one of those types of decisions.
Sure. Well, at right about the same time, a very big fan of mine. Like I said, back then I had a radio show in San Francisco and it was on a main station. And so we built a fan base very quickly. And one of my regular listeners called and said, hey, you've got to meet this developer. Now, this was right about the same time I had this bad feeling about the other guy, but kind of went through with it. And so it's just like, oh, I want to be so cautious here. I don't want to repeat mistakes. And so I just went real slow. Okay, fine, I'll meet this guy, but I will not be pressured, and I'm not going to jump into something I don't understand. But I did make the drive. It turns out he was a 45-year veteran, or at the time, like 40 years in development, very, very successful. He'd built stuff all over the San Francisco Bay Area and other states as well. And so he had the track record. I went to his gorgeous home in Carmel. I got to see his private jet, and like his crew, like clearly the guy had some money. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're legit. They could have stolen that money, but it seemed pretty obvious that this guy was the real deal and had a full track record. And he had found this property, this foreclosed subdivision in Portland in 2010 when everything, it was falling apart and nobody had money. Everybody was experiencing losses, or most people anyway. And so he found this subdivision waterfront in Portland in the coolest part of town, the Pearl District. And it was basically 70% complete, only needed interior work completed, the carpets, the fun part, the artistic part. And we were able to buy, he said, I can get this thing for $3 million, all 27 homes waterfront for $3 million when the loan alone had been about $14 million. And I thought, okay, I don't know this guy very well, but he's sure, his resume checks out and his background check, was all good. So it was like, I feel like I'm kind of jumping in again, but there's more here. And so we ended up partnering with him. We raised the $3 million in about a weekend because he was just so credible. And those investors made over 20% in 2010. I mean, the worst, darkest part of the recession, these investors were just making a bunch of money. It ended up being extremely successful. And since then, we've been partnering with this guy for 8 years now. He's been my partner, and we've done deal after deal after deal. That's just been so successful for me and our investors. So that was a good one.
Wow. Well, one of the things I was thinking about when you were talking about that and how you were kind of changing to a different, person to try to help you along the way. When you had the following, and because I'm sure you probably still have that same following or has have grown that following since then, but when you had the following back, when you had the negative person coming in and not doing real well for your investors and things like that, did those same people continue to follow you and trust you even though you had this person on your stage speaking?
Yeah, actually, that's the shocking and surprising thing is that many of those people who lost money have invested in subsequent deals. And I'm amazed. But what I told them, they knew it was one of my first deals. They knew it was when I was kind of young and new to the business. And they also knew that anybody could have checked to see the title of the loans that they were, to make sure that, that these were properly recorded and had gone through title and escrow. I mean, at the end of the day, it was their money and they knew they were responsible. But, one of the hardest things I had to do was to make that phone call and say, I've just found out that your money's not secure. And, that was a hard call to make. And I broke down in tears, I was trying to be a big girl and I just sobbed, I'm like, I'm so sorry. And if there's any way I can make this up to you, if I can find a deal that's amazing, you will be the first in, and I will make sure you somehow make your money back. And they were so grateful. And we've put them, like I said, many of them invested in these other deals that one of Fred's deals, the guy that the good one, ended up yielding about 40% IRR like per year on his next deal. And many of those investors went in it. So, if they lost 10%, well, they made 40 on the next deal. So technically, you could say they didn't lose money. And that's, that they have stuck with me partly because I was so honest and let them know I was scared and sorry. And, I took responsibility and not, maybe auditing him on a, like monthly basis or whatever, but, ask them to also take responsibility for their part too. And yeah, we are still in touch. They still come to events. They're, most of them that haven't moved away, I see regularly.
Well, the other thing I was thinking about here is, I was talking the other day to somebody, I think it was just last night, I was on a phone call and, I was going to be, helping, raise some capital for a group of investors that needed some help from the GP side of a deal. And I told them, I said, well, I want to make sure that when I bring my investors into your deal, that it looks good and that it is actually a good, solid deal, not just from the number standpoint, but also from the people who are going to be managing the deal as well, because at the end of the day, even if I put my own money into it, it's my own fault. If I make that decision to put my money in a deal and it goes south. But when I start bringing in other people's money, I feel like I have a greater responsibility to those people than I do to my own money, because like you said, it's very hard to make that call of, hey, your money is not secure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, boy, I learned that, like I said, I learned that the hard way, to have to tell people that there were losses based on a decision or a referral that I made. That's a tough call to make. And, anytime you're doing you're a syndicator or raising money. You put these things usually in an LLC, and you have asset protection and insurance and all these things to protect yourself from lawsuits and so forth. And, deals go bad. They do. But if that happens, and if it happens more than once, well, guess what? No matter who cares if someone's suing you or not, you're not going to stay in business, because we have the internet now. Everybody shares everything. So if you can't, if you consistently bring bad deals to people, you will not be in business. So it's not even about lawsuits anymore. I'm doing raising money right now for a deal. And my husband was like, okay, did you run this by the attorney? I said, well, of course. But, remember, an LLC is only going to protect you so far. It's not going to protect your reputation.
Yeah, that's a great point, because the reputation, as you said, with the internet and social media and that kind of thing, just a couple of bad things and it feels like the whole world knows. I'm sure it's not quite that bad, but that's what it feels like.
Well, your investors know, because the first thing an investor is going to do is look you up, before they put money in the deal. And so it is extremely public, and the people who want to know will know. So your reputation is probably the most important thing to invest in, and
how much money would you say was involved in that deal that didn't go so well?
I raised about, 1.2 million or something. And it was like a 20% loss, 20 to 30% loss. So it was definitely a huge bummer, especially because it was totally unnecessary. If this guy had just played it right and done the right thing, everyone would have made money. Mm-hmm. He would have made money, and the investors would have made. You don't need to cheat to make money. It just puts you out of business. He's not in the business anymore because no one would ever work with him, right?
Well, thankfully, you didn't lose all of that 1.2 million. It was, even though it was still a good significant amount at 240,000, it's not a whole, 1.2 million. So you're able to, probably hopefully get out of that deal early enough to save it so that there wasn't going to lose all of it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's in hard money. That's the thing about hard money lending when it comes to real estate. Your funds should be secured to a property. And in most cases there were just a couple where, he overlent on properties, and then those properties didn't do as well as he thought. The contractors couldn't get them done in time, and they overspent, and then the property was upside down. But you still have that collateral, and that's important. But there are I just did a real estate news story. I have a real estate news podcast, and I just did a story about two people who committed fraud in California and were just recently indicted. They took investor money just like that for private loans. I mean, private loan lending is probably one of the safest things you can do as an investor. It really is, if it's secured. And so these investors were like, yeah, private lending's safe. So they just, wired the money to this guy. They didn't wire it to the title company. They wire it to the guy, and he doesn't secure it to the property. So he ended up taking all this investor money and didn't have the supporting property. So I think one of them bilked $20 million out of people. Just amazing. And now he's going to jail. It's just so dumb. So dumb.
Wow. Well, tell us, as far as your decision-making process goes, when you're facing a difficult decision, whether it's because, you don't know an exact right or best choice, or if it's difficult just because it's going to be one of those that's a little bit painful to put into action, what is something that you do, or you have a strategy that you use to come to that decision where you feel comfortable and you're ready to move forward?
Well, now I have a team, and I've brought in people that are better at certain things than I am. So, am I an accountant? No. So I need to bring in numbers people to really look deep and question things I wouldn't know how to question. Because now I've got millions and millions of dollars at stake. I mean, when I do a raise, it's $13 to $20 million. So I can't make a mistake. I have to have very, very good people and to really dig down and review the properties. But before we even get to that level, I will sit, this is funny, I will sit with my husband. Now, very often couples marry, you find someone who's the opposite of you. It's opposites attract, right? So you find someone who has different strengths than you. And those different strengths can drive you absolutely crazy at times. Like if somebody's super neat and you're messy, then the messy person doesn't want to always have to be picking up after themselves. And the clean person hates the mess, right? So Rich is very detailed. He's an analyst. I am someone who can sense people and kind of see the big picture. And it used to be that his detail would frustrate me and my, gusto would frustrate him. So now we have learned how to really benefit from each other's strengths. I sit down And I go through the tedious process of going through every detail with him, which I just hate. But he has to start the conversation with the exciting part, because that's what I like, So he's like, tell me about the deal. What are you excited about? I get to tell him everything. And then he'll say, okay, now let's look at, how could this go wrong? and then we.
Have you guys been sitting in our living room recently? Because that sounds like a few conversations we've had before.
It's whenever I talk about this in front of a room, the whole room laughs, because that's just how couples are. You're usually opposites, and that's a good thing. You don't want two detail people who'll never take a step forward, but you don't want two people who will jump into anything. So we balance each other out, but instead of driving each other crazy, there are ways to really use those strengths to each other's benefits. And so, like I said, it used to be that I would come to it with him with a deal or an idea, and it would be like, right away, he would just chop it down. It was like, okay, forget it. I'm not even going to talk to you anymore. And so we've learned, okay, there's a way to do this. And the way is, honey, let me tell you why I'm excited. I need to tell you why I'm excited. I want you to see the vision. Let's not just reduce my dreams immediately. And then, so he will, and he'll listen and he'll write it down. Okay. I see all these benefits. And then we can get to the detail, but it doesn't feel like it feels like I've already been heard,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so neat, because you really have to appreciate that other person's strengths in order to make that kind of situation work, and really, I think bring out the best in both people, because you're really both at your best when you're both being able to be good at what you're naturally good at and to help each other. Do you have a book or a resource that you could recommend to our listeners? Maybe something that has impacted the way that you make decisions or the way that you run your businesses?
Sure. I did write a book. It's called Retire Rich with Rentals. But probably the book that influenced me the most getting started was a book called The Science of Getting Rich. And it's a little bit more mindset, but I needed it because I had issues around money. And a lot of people do. And so when they get money, they lose it just as quickly because they have preconceived beliefs about it, or thoughts that maybe they don't deserve it, or it's not spiritual, or whatever we're raised with, all these negative things. People hate the 1%. So why would you want to be one? So I had to work through that. And that was, The Science of Getting Rich. It got me over that, to where it's like, you know what? Money's a wonderful thing. And when given to the right people, great things can happen.
Speaking of money, what is the most exciting thing that you've done with the money that you've made up to this point?
Oh, well, it's probably where I'm sitting right now. I am in a little condo right by the ocean, right by my very favorite surf spot. Rich and I would go out and surf and look at these condos and think, wouldn't that be amazing to have one of those? And someday, then we could just have our surfboards right there. So the opportunity came up. We bought a little tiny condo. It's where my office is, so I can look out the waves. And if there's a good wave, I can run down, grab my board, and go.
That is awesome. And what's the number one thing on your bucket list right now that you want to do or buy or see?
Interesting. Well, Rich and I have had Thailand on our list, and it's not about money. It's about time, taking the time to take that travel and go. So that is the true measure of wealth, in my opinion. It's not how much money you have, it's how much experience. And right now we're just, we're a little short on time. So that will be my goal, to be able to carve out a month and just go travel.
It's interesting because that's one of my places as well. I'd love to be able to visit Thailand.
Yeah. So. Yeah. I love Thai food, and I hear there's like $5 massages. So
wow, you never can pass up a $5 massage.
Yeah.
Well, look, Kathy, I really, really appreciate you taking some time out of your schedule to be with us today. How can the listeners reach out to you if they have further questions or want to kind of follow you on a different channel?
Sure. It's Real Wealth Network is our website. It's just packed with free information and education for investors, so they don't make some of the mistakes I made. So it's realwealthnetwork.com. And then the Real Wealth Show on iTunes is the show that I started with 15 years ago and still have.
Well, again, thank you so much, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.
All right. Thank you. You too.
Do you want to nominate a highly successful entrepreneur or real estate investor to be a guest on this show? Email us at dan@toughdecisions.net. Help us by spreading the word about our show with your friends. And also take time right now to subscribe and leave a review on iTunes, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, or your favorite platform. You've been listening to the Tough Decisions Show.